Picture a fleet of luxury cars. We're talking, 6 Mercedes-Benzes, a Bentley, a McLaren, a Maserati, and even a Tesla Cybertruck.
I mean, that sounds like the garage of a tech billionaire, right?
Right, exactly. But these vehicles were actually seized in a massive federal sweep in Ohio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We are looking at 27,486 borrowers who have just been suspended by the Small Business Administration. And this is over $1.1 billion in suspected fraudulent pandemic-era loans.
That is just a staggering number.
It really is. And the wild part, this is just one state share of an estimated $200 billion nationwide fraud problem.
Just one state. Unbelievable.
If you enjoy content like this, please take a moment to like, subscribe, follow, and turn on notifications so you'll always know when new content is released.
As a quick update, we continue to monitor the Martin Stevens v. OpenAI matter. It is important to note that this is still not a lawsuit. We remain in a voluntary quiet period at the request of Martin Stevens to allow time for any potential developments behind the scenes. At the time of this recording, we do not know whether any progress has been made. No settlement discussions or negotiations have been publicly confirmed. We can also report that the dead man's switch has not been activated, meaning Martin Stevens remains safe from both a physical and legal standpoint. We will provide updates if circumstances change.
Now, putting the legal updates aside, let's get back to those seized sports cars in Ohio.
Yeah, let's dig into that.
So today we are unpacking a massive stack of sources for you. We've got Department of Justice press releases, a heavily detailed Government Accountability Office report, SBA Inspector General audits, and some local Ohio reporting, too.
I have a lot of material to get through.
It is. And our mission for this deep dive is to understand not just the jaw-dropping numbers behind this $1.1 billion crackdown, but the systemic, technological, and oversight failures that allowed this fraud to happen in the first place.
Right, because when you see these flashy headlines about seized assets, your first question really should be, how did the system break down to allow this on such an industrial scale?
Exactly. So how did it happen?
Well, to understand the breakdown, we really have to look at the sheer velocity of the relief effort. I mean, the government was trying to push trillions of dollars out the door in a matter of weeks, right, to prevent total economic collapse.
Yeah, everybody remembers that panic.
Right, but by removing the traditional friction of underwriting, the verification steps that normally take weeks or even months, they inadvertently created the most lucrative target for financial crime in modern history.
Wow.
Yeah. And the Ohio sweep we're talking about is just the latest, highly visible symptom of a much deeper architectural flaw in how our government manages digital data.
Okay, let's start on the ground in Ohio to see what that actually looks like in practice. There was this highly publicized press conference at the Defense Supplies Center in Columbus.
Oh, yeah, the one with the top Trump administration officials.
Exactly. You had Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, FBI Director Kash Patel, SBA Administrator Kelly Loeffler, and CMS Administrator Dr. Mehmet Oz all there. They essentially declared a war on fraud.
And they brought receipts, right?
They did. They announced 14 indictments right out of the gate.
Yeah, and one of the most glaring examples they presented was this $30 million behavioral health scam.
Wait, $30 million?
Yeah. According to the indictments, these entities were billing Medicaid for therapeutic services that were supposedly provided to autistic children at summer camps and church groups.
Okay, so I actually looked into the mechanics of how this works, and they aren't just, sending an invoice in the mail. They are exploiting provider identification numbers to submit massive batches of digital claims to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
Right, it's all automated.
Exactly. The camps didn't exist. The services were never provided. It was completely fabricated data pushed through an automated billing system that just blindly paid out the claims.
And that blind reliance on unverified data, that is the core theme running through all of our sources today.
Yeah.
The systems are designed to process formats, not to verify physical reality.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, if the digital paperwork is filled out correctly, the algorithm just approves the payment.
And that actually leads to a claim Dr. Oz made at that press conference that requires some serious scrutiny. He stated that they found 288 home healthcare facilities listed on a single block in Columbus.
On one block.
One single block. And many of them were just vacant buildings.
That is insane.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. 288 healthcare facilities on one road. That's not a loophole. That's like trying to hide an elephant behind a parking meter.
It really is.
How does a system designed to protect tax dollars miss an entire block of fake clinics? Like, how does a modern data infrastructure miss that?
Well, it reveals a complete lack of spatial analytics and cross-referencing.
What do you mean by that?
So, in a robust commercial financial system, an address is automatically pinged against commercial real estate databases, utility records, and postal service drop data.
Oh, so they would instantly know it's a vacant building.
Exactly. But here you have a classic pay-and-chase environment. The priority was distributing the funds, so the spatial verification was bypassed entirely. You distribute the money first, and you rely on auditors to chase the bad actors years later.
Wow. And, we also need to impartially report the political and social atmosphere happening on the ground alongside these audits because the sources show a lot of tension right now.
Yeah, the fallout is definitely getting heated.
It is. At the press conference, Dr. Oz explicitly criticized certain immigrant populations, specifically mentioning Somalian, Nepalese, and Bhutanese communities, suggesting they view this fraud as acceptable.
Right, and conservative bloggers have heavily targeted Somali American businesses online.
Yeah, without evidence, according to the reporting. And at the same time, acting AG Blanche pointedly criticized compliance in Democratic-controlled states.
Oh, he called out Hawaii, right?
He did. He specifically called out Hawaii, whose Medicaid fraud unit was actually decertified by the Federal Trade Commission.
Wait, really?
Decertified? Yeah, for producing 0 convictions over a 5-year period between 2021 and 2025.
Wow. So the fallout is causing deep fractures and finger-pointing at both the state and community levels.
Absolutely. And, we're simply conveying what the reporting shows here, but it is clear that a financial loss of this magnitude inevitably breeds intense political and social friction.
Oh, without a doubt.
There was also this quirky, somewhat revealing detail from the press conference. The FBI proudly announced a new Top 10 Most Wanted Fraudsters initiative.
Okay.
But the list they actually presented only had 8 people on it.
Wait, they only had 8 on top 10 lists?
Yes, only 8.
It is a small administrative oversight, but it perfectly encapsulates the scramble happening behind the scenes. They are trying to put a public face on an incredibly complex, largely faceless cybercrime.
Right.
And finding specific individuals to pin to these massive automated data thefts is proving exceptionally difficult for them.
Well, you don't siphon $1.1 billion out of a single state without attracting professional operations, right? Yeah. The money didn't just stay in Ohio local businesses. It fueled international cyber syndicates.
This is where the story takes a really dark turn.
Yeah. The sources detail a $15 million romance scam based out of the Northern District of Ohio that defrauded over 130 older Americans. And the technology they used is terrifying.
It's awful. This was a highly organized operation utilizing artificial intelligence. The fraudsters actually deployed AI-driven video platforms to create fictitious female personas.
Like fake live video.
Yes. They generated fake, real-time video and audio to manipulate these elderly victims over a period of months, building really deep emotional trust.
See, when we hear pandemic fraud, we usually picture a guy making up a fake payroll, right? But here's where it gets really interesting. They are using AI-driven video platforms to run international romance scams funded by U.S. taxpayers. This is highly organized cybercrime, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And it shows how fraudsters follow the path of least resistance.
It's unsettling to realize that the lack of domestic safeguards essentially financed global cybercrime operations. Because the way they connected this romance scam to the pandemic relief is brilliant in the darkest way possible.
Yeah. The mule network.
Right. They used the romance victims as unwitting money mules in the United States. The international syndicates would apply for fraudulent SBA loans, have the U.S. government deposit the funds directly into the bank accounts of these manipulated elderly victims.
And then the AI girlfriend would convince the victim to wire the money overseas to help her out of a fake emergency.
Exactly.
The victims had no idea they were laundering stolen federal funds. And by the time the government realized the loan was fraudulent, the money had already been wired offshore.
So what did they do?
International law enforcement had to intervene. They detained 3 suspects, with 2 currently awaiting extradition in Ghana. And that is exactly where they seized some of those luxury assets we mentioned earlier.
Including a Lamborghini and a Tesla Cybertruck in Accra, Ghana.
Yeah.
A Cybertruck in West Africa funded by Ohio pandemic relief money.
It's surreal. But it perfectly illustrates that path of least resistance I mentioned. When the U.S. government opened the floodgates with trillions of dollars in relief, international syndicates pivoted immediately.
Of course they did.
They realized it was far easier and more lucrative to defraud a rushed U.S. government program using AI deepfakes than to try and hack into a heavily fortified commercial bank.
Yeah, they leveraged cutting-edge technology against outdated government defenses. Which brings us to the architecture of the Small Business Administration system.
Right, the root of the problem.
During the pandemic, the SBA relied heavily on what they called self-certification, meaning applicants essentially just had to check a box promising they were telling the truth about their payroll and revenue.
The front-end friction was deliberately removed to save businesses from bankruptcy.
Right. But the assumption sold to the public was that the government would catch the fraud on the back end using advanced technology.
And did they?
Well, according to the Government Accountability Office report in our stack of sources, the SBA used a machine learning tool to review Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, applications. But the GAO found a massive fundamental flaw in how that algorithm was trained.
Oh, this part is fascinating. So in machine learning, you have supervised and unsupervised learning. The SBA used a supervised learning model, but they trained it almost exclusively on existing flags and historical data.
Okay, meaning what?
Meaning, it was only looking for patterns of fraud that the SBA already recognized from past years. It was not actively analyzing the massive influx of new data to identify novel, complex, or evolving suspicious patterns that the syndicates were inventing in real time.
So, wait. If I understand this correctly, the system they built to catch the fraud was essentially a smoke detector that only went off if you explicitly told it there was a fire.
That analogy is spot on.
And if they used a new kind of smoke, the alarm just stayed silent.
Exactly. It is
fair
a
enough.
fundamental failure of predictive analytics. And, compounding the technical failure was a massive transparency issue.
Oh, the reporting mandate.
Yeah, a standing executive order requires all federal agencies to publicly disclose their use cases for artificial intelligence. But the SBA failed to report this tool.
Wait, they just didn't report it?
Worse, SBA officials actually told the GAO they had 0 AI use cases, despite federal statutes strictly defining machine learning as a subset of artificial intelligence.
That is wild. But, I was reading through the privacy laws cited in the sources, and the lack of AI isn't even the most shocking part to me.
Really? What is?
Even if they had the best AI in the world, it was starved of basic data. The SBA was operating in a total silo. They were legally barred from cross-referencing an applicant's Social Security number with the Social Security Administration.
Legally barred. Wow.
Yes. They couldn't seamlessly ask the IRS for tax transcripts to prove a business even existed or generated revenue in 2019. They couldn't access the National Directory of New Hires to verify employment records.
See, that's the legacy of the Privacy Act of 1974 and various siloed agency protocols.
Yeah.
It means federal departments often operate in total isolation.
Which is crazy to think about.
We assume the government is a monolith sharing data instantly, but legally and technologically, they're deeply fragmented. The SBA was flying blind. They were forced to take an applicant's word for it because establishing the API connections to the IRS databases would have taken years of legal and technical negotiations.
So the front-end controls are gone, the machine learning is looking the wrong way, and the data is trapped in silos. But the SBA assured everyone they had a safety net, right? Manual back-end reviews.
Right, the manual reviews.
The SBA Inspector General audits, however, reveal that this safety net also completely collapsed. Let's look at what the auditors call Hold Code 70.
Okay, so Hold Code 70 was the internal database flag the SBA used for a potential clawback.
Meaning they wanted the money back.
Exactly. They audited loans that had already been forgiven and flagged 37,938 of them, totaling $4.6 billion, as highly suspicious and potentially ineligible for the forgiveness they had already received.
So they flagged almost $5 billion. And they had a standardized 4-step review process to determine if they should claw back that money, right?
Right. But the Inspector General found that for these specific flagged loans, the SBA only completed steps 1 and 2. They completely abandoned step 3 and step 4, which was the critical higher authority review required to finalize the clawback.
And the reason why is just, it's mind-blowing.
The agency's stated reason in the audit is astonishing. They claimed they lacked the necessary infrastructure in their loan review platform to perform those final steps.
What does that even mean, lacked infrastructure?
The software's user interface literally did not have the digital workflow built in to route those specific complex cases to the higher authority for final approval.
They didn't have the button for it.
Literally. So the investigations just stopped.
And the deeper you read into the audit, the more concerning the precedents become. Of those flagged loans, over 26,000 of them were for $25,000 or less.
Which adds up.
Yeah, that totals $454 million. According to their internal guidance, the SBA essentially considered these smaller loans immaterial and signaled they may not even prioritize seeking recovery. The OIG is sounding the alarm on this.
And rightly so. In auditing, immateriality usually refers to rounding errors or negligible sums. Applying it to nearly $500 million of stolen taxpayer money is a significant policy shift.
Yeah, I'd say so.
The OIG argues it sends a very clear message to future financial criminals. Structure your theft to stay under $25,000, and the federal government won't bother coming after you because the administrative cost of the clawback isn't worth their time.
So what does this all mean for the everyday taxpayer? You have a system that is fundamentally broken at the administrative level, and nowhere is that clearer than the referral failure.
Oh, the referral numbers are grim.
The SBA sent 3 million fraud referrals to the Inspector General to investigate, but the sources note that about 2 million of those were completely unactionable.
2 million.
2 million alerts of likely fraud sitting in a digital filing cabinet, completely useless because of bad data entry. They were missing basic data elements or consisted of endless duplicates. It's like calling the police to report a robbery but forgetting to give them an address.
It is exactly like that, which brings us to the enablers.
Right. Who is pushing all this through?
The SBA didn't process all these loans alone. They relied on thousands of lending institutions to act as the conduit. And the OIG reports shift heavy focus to third-party processors and non-bank lenders, often referred to as fintechs.
I looked into how these fintechs actually process the loans, and it's not a loan officer sitting at a mahogany desk reviewing your business plan.
Not at all.
It's an automated API ingesting thousands of digital applications a minute. According to the OIG, non-bank lenders originated $14.2 billion in suspected fraudulent loans.
$14 billion.
That is a fraud rate 5 times higher than traditional banks. And lenders who used third-party service providers to batch process their applications had a fraud rate 3 times higher.
Because the scale of automation fundamentally changes the risk profile. Traditional banks had existing relationships with their clients, right? They had strict know your customer or KYC protocols mandated by banking regulations.
Right, they actually knew who they were lending to.
Yes, exactly. Fintechs and third-party service providers were processing massive volumes of applications for people they had never met. And the incentive structure was completely misaligned.
Oh, so?
They were collecting processing fees from the government for every approved loan, but they bore zero of the risk if the loan went bad because the government guaranteed it. Yeah, they reaped all the reward on the front end while automating the verification away.
Naturally, when a systemic failure reaches the hundreds of billions, the political blame game kicks into high gear. We see this vividly in the Brief Glance article. Administrator Loeffler explicitly blames the Biden administration, stating they left $200 billion in pandemic-era fraud completely unaddressed.
But then there's the other side.
Right. Meanwhile, a 2021 House Oversight memo places the blame squarely on the Trump administration's initial 2020 rollout, citing their refusal to implement basic front-end controls. Now, we're not picking sides here.
No, our role is to look at the data objectively. And what the deep dive into the OIG estimates actually shows is that a $200 billion fraud problem transcends any single administration. It was a failure of the system's architecture, the data silos, the outdated legacy platforms, the lack of API integrations with the IRS. And that spans multiple years and multiple leadership changes.
But while the politicians argue over who caused it, there is massive collateral damage happening right now. Let's look back at the Ohio crackdown. 27,486 borrowers are currently suspended.
That's a lot of businesses.
Yes, and they are instantly blacklisted from federal programs. For example, if you are a minority-owned or disadvantaged small business relying on the AA Business Development Program, which is a crucial lifeline designed to help these companies compete for federal contracts, you are suddenly cut off.
And the appeals process through the SBA's Office of Hearings and Appeals takes a minimum of 45 days.
45 days where you can't do anything.
Right. During that time, the business cannot secure federal contracts, cannot receive federal aid, and is placed in total administrative limbo.
So, if you're a legitimate business owner whose identity was stolen by an international syndicate and used without your knowledge, or if your accountant simply transposed a digit on a tax form, you are now locked out of the federal ecosystem entirely while you wait months for a hearing.
It's devastating.
It is. How does the government walk the tightrope between punishing actual criminals and not crushing the honest businesses they were trying to save in the first place?
Well, it is the ultimate human cost of retroactive enforcement. When you rely on blunt, automated data analytics to suspend tens of thousands of businesses simultaneously, the algorithm lacks nuance. It swings the pendulum from zero friction during the crisis to absolute gridlock during the recovery.
Let's bring the scope of this conversation into perspective. We started with $1.1 billion in Ohio and traced it to international AI romance scams moving money to Ghana.
Yeah, it's quite the journey.
We peeled back the layers to find machine learning tools trained on the wrong data, massive legal silos blocking the IRS, a software platform that lacked the basic buttons to finalize clawbacks, and fintech APIs incentivized by processing fees.
It's a perfect storm of systemic failure.
And as a result of all of this, the government has already had to write off $75 billion in COVID economic injury disaster loans, or EIDL loans, as simply unrecoverable.
It serves as a permanent case study in modern governance. The desire to provide immediate economic relief completely outstripped the government's technological capacity to oversee that relief securely.
We built a financial system designed to move at the speed of a crisis, but oversight moved at the speed of bureaucracy. As we increasingly rely on AI to govern both the distribution of aid and the catching of criminals, the ultimate question isn't just how we get the money back. It's whether our government's technological infrastructure can ever truly outpace the innovators of fraud. If you found this episode valuable, please like, subscribe, share, follow, and turn on notifications. It helps us continue bringing you content like this and ensures you never miss future releases.